Hi everyone, I'm Ali, I'm an architect, and today we're going to talk about the RIBA Plan of Work, so let's go. Okay, so as I usually say, this is a quick video for you today, and hopefully it is quick because I am running out of the ability to talk. So not COVID or anything, just a general cold, but the reason I wanted to make this video and kind of prioritize it is because when I first started this channel, I wanted to have like a few key videos on things like PEDR and also some of the base things for part 3. So the ARB RIBA videos that we have and also this one are kind of some of the key things to be aware of, and the part 3 criteria from the ARB as well, and that for PEDR. So the other side of PEDR is obviously the RIBA Plan of Work. If you're filling out PEDR sheets, then you will be familiar with it. So the main purpose of the RIBA Plan of Work is to provide architects a framework that structures the projects and the way you move through them. And that's why it's so important for your PEDR, as we've spoken about a lot in the past. Essentially, your PEDR is showing that you do know how a project goes from the beginning to the end of the whole piece of construction. The key things that the RIBA Plan of Work 2020 introduces is a little bit more surety on when planning happens, a little bit more surety on like when procurement happens, and also a few more kind of overlays. So there's a BIM overlay because obviously that's much more prevalent in construction than it was in the 2013. And sustainability as well. So there's a green overlay for the Plan of Work that's trying to weave sustainability and the thinking that needs to happen behind trying to make a building that's sustainable, both in the design stages but obviously also in its use, which is a much longer term, hopefully, than how long it took to design and build it. The 2020 Plan of Work also takes stage 5 and renames that manufacturing and construction. This is to kind of take into account modern methods of construction where things might be prefabricated off-site and then brought to site, which obviously is happening. So it's trying to just clarify that that's not necessarily like on-site construction. And that stage can kind of flex depending on what kind of construction's happening. The other thing is something that was in the 2013, but it's kind of been cleared up a little bit more. So we have stage 6, which is handover, which is important in making sure that the people who are going to be the occupiers of the building understand how the building was designed and how its systems operate so that they can actually use it as the design intended. And then stage 7, which is use, and the idea of that is that we're trying to close the feedback loop, basically. Something that architects don't do a lot is find out how a building's actually performing in use, you know, a year after or 5 years after it's been constructed or even longer, because you need to be seeing if the way you're designing actually works in practice. Like, does it work as we intended it to in the real world once it's actually in use? And is the best ways to use it been like communicated to the occupiers that are living in it? And the other thing that the RIBA Plan of Work tends to try and set out, and as I said, your particular practice, if they have their own version, they'll have more specific information on this, but it's kind of what deliverables or what information is required at each stage and what should be done. There's sometimes a kind of start and end of stage check, where you'd often submit a report to your client and where a lot of architects would bill at the end of a stage, and those stages are often aligned with the RIBA Plan of Work. So your office should hopefully have a clear idea of what stage you're in and what it means to be in that stage and what the specific deliverables for it are and what allows you to kind of move into the next stage and what's the difference with that stage, like what's going to be happening there. Okay, and then also, as we've said, the things that you see in part 3 applicants that they tend to be missing is stage 4 and stage 5. So stage 4 is technical design, so this would, as I would interpret it, would usually be designed for tender. So it's actually like construction drawings that are being done. And obviously manufacturing and construction is on site. So tendering can happen anytime through stage 4, depending on whether it's going out as different packages of tender or whether it's going out as one big package. And again, that depends on the scale of the job and what kind of sector you're working in and what kind of building it is. So these are things that you need to check, but you tend to miss out on those stages if you work in practices that can't give you on-site experience because they're maybe not doing anything after planning or after building regs. They're tending to leave that stage and they're not involved anymore. And that can be quite difficult. So that's when the Plan of Work can actually be quite helpful, because if you don't know that and you've never worked through one of those stages, it can tell you what you should be doing. So it can tell you about you should be doing technical drawings, then you should be tendering. And if these things don't necessarily mean anything to you, that allows you to have the terminology to search and fill out more of your experience so you can understand what is the best practice. And one of the great things about the plan of work is you can track how a job kind of performed against those early stages and the late stages. So as a student who's filling out PEDR, or as a student who's doing a part 3, then the main thing that you want to be conveying is that you are doing a kind of constant critical analysis on what you're seeing in practice. So was the briefing process good enough? Is the product that the client got in the end the same as what they asked for in the beginning? How often did that change? Did it change detrimentally to the project? And how did they feel about the process at the end of it? And how involved was an architect? Because that's interesting as well. Like, was the architect needed to be involved in construction? Did the client want them there as their agent on site, or did the client not see the need for an architect at that stage of the project? So all these things are interesting, and they're the kind of things you can talk about in case studies as well. Case studies are most interesting for your part 3 if they deal with things that were not best practice, things that went wrong, things that have happened, so that you as a trainee architect are learning something from each of those situations that you're seeing. So that's what the RIBA Plan of Work is. That's why it's kind of important. And like I say, kind of paired with the video that I've done on the ARB Part 3 criteria. The ARB Part 3 criteria, I can talk, I'm ill, it's an excuse, and the Plan of Work together are kind of two things that if you can get your head around those, you're going to understand a lot of the terminology you're going to need for Part 3, you're going to understand where you have experience and where you're missing experience, and honestly that is half the battle with PEDR and with doing Part 3, is knowing what you've done and what you don't know. And even if you can't get direct experience of it, by knowing that you don't know about it, you can read around it. Get a book on tendering, get a book on construction, on technical drawing details. You know, all these kind of things allow you to understand how a building goes together and what an architect's process is throughout the whole thing. So they're kind of two really key documents, hence why there's specific videos on them. The other thing is, I refer you back to the 5 things for PEDR. Because it is impossible to track half the time what you're doing, always keep a little notebook by you and make a note. If you know what stage you're working in, make a note of that. So it'd be like, you know, XXX cottage, if it's a small practice, you're working on like stage 2 and you did like 3 hours. That's a little thing to make a note of, and then do your next note of the next bit of work that you did that day. It makes it so much easier to fill out your PEDR. And in your PEDR, if you reference the stage and talk a little bit more about what should be happening next, what has happened previously, so that it's clear when it comes to your part 3 that you understand the work you did and the where it sits in the plan of work, and also where it sits in the kind of the whole project life cycle, from, you know, the first kind of inception, the strategic definition of it, to the final in use passed over to the client or occupier, and you understand where you sit in that and what your role is and what's going to be your next role, then the next and next and next. And so that's it, I think, guys. That's the general guide to the RIBA Plan of Work and why it was set up. And so if you have any questions on it, then please do drop them below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. And wherever you are, guys, have a great day. Bye. That doesn't even make any sense, so I'm probably not going to use that.